That day, I was trapped on the street in the rainstorm. It was the first time he didn't come to pick me up. Jade got divorced and came back. She's in a bad mood, so I'm dropping her off first. I'll pick you up later. I didn't wait. I knew he wouldn't come back. I turned around, bought a plane ticket, and vanished. The next day, he came home and didn't see me, so he asked the nanny, "It rained heavily yesterday. Weren't you and the madam trapped on the street?" That rainstorm came without warning, as if to drown the entire island of Manhattan in gray despair. Rain pounded furiously against the massive black awning outside the Met, letting out a dull roar. Minutes ago, I was still linking arms with Spencer Davenport, acting as his perfect accessory, socializing among those Wall Street vultures and Upper East Side socialites, accepting their hypocritical praise. But now I was like a piece of forgotten luggage, dumped in the standing water by the roadside. Spencer's black Rolls-Royce Cullinan hadn't even turned off its engine. The headlights pierced the curtain of rain, casting two pale beams of light onto the slick Fifth Avenue. Through the half-lowered window, I could see his side profile in the driver's seat, chiseled features that were now written all over with agitation. "Evelyn, can't you be sensible?" His voice cut through the sound of the rain, carrying a sense of command he took for granted, as if passing a trivial resolution at a board meeting. Jade was screaming on the phone. She said she swallowed pills, and only I can calm her down. It's a matter of life and death. I stood at the edge of the steps, the hem of my haute couture evening gown already dirty from the splashed mud. At this moment, my mind was surprisingly calm, even having the leisure to notice his hands gripping the steering wheel. Those hands that once put the ring on my finger when I took my vows, now impatiently wanting to rush to another woman. "So?" I heard my own voice as calm as a pool of dead water. "Today is our 3rd wedding anniversary, Spencer. You promised tonight would be just the two of us. Don't be unreasonable right now." He didn't even look at me, his gaze fixed on the navigation on his phone. That was the route to a luxury apartment in the West Village. "I'll have the driver turn around and come back for you. There is security here and an awning so you won't get wet. Be a proper Mrs. Davenport, okay?" Proper. These 3 words were like an invisible slap, striking hard across my face. For the past 3 years, for the sake of these 2 words, I went from a flesh-and-blood human to the Davenport family's most perfect ornament. "What if I don't let you go?" I asked softly, even though I knew the answer. Spencer finally turned his head to look at me. There was no guilt in that look, only a condescending impatience, as if he were looking at an unreasonable child. "Evelyn, don't force me to dump you here. If anything happens to Jade, you won't be able to bear the responsibility." With that, the car window slowly rose, cutting off my final view. Without any hesitation, without any pause, the engine let out a low roar as the massive vehicle crushed over the puddles on the ground, splashing up a sheet of filthy, muddy water. A drop even landed on my cheek. That was the cold, dust-scented reality. He left just like that. For that childhood sweetheart who was always emotionally unstable, alcoholic, and had a chaotic private life, yet whom he regarded as his fragile muse. Other luxury cars continued to arrive around me. Gentlemen in tuxedos held huge black umbrellas, carefully escorting their female companions into the cars. Some people recognized me, casting glances of surprise or even pity. "Is that Mrs. Davenport? Why is she alone?" "I heard that painter ex-girlfriend is back in the country. Looks like the rumors are true." Those hushed whispers mingled with the sound of the rain, stabbing into my ears like needles. I should have felt ashamed. I should have lowered my head as usual, called the driver, and maintained my final shred of dignity. But I didn't. That spark suppressed in the depths of my heart for 3 years was completely extinguished by this freezing rain in an instant, leaving behind nothing but a wasteland of dead ash. I don't need a driver. I don't need that penthouse so empty it's suffocating, and I certainly don't need that husband who can't even remember who I am. I took out my phone, and the screen still displayed a message Spencer sent 5 minutes ago. I'll come home as soon as I'm done handling this. Go home? That place with only icy Bauhaus furniture and regularly replaced fresh flowers, but the one place devoid of any warmth? I laughed so hard tears almost came out. I opened my contacts, my finger hovering over that name I knew by heart. For 3 years, this number was pinned to the top, the one I would answer immediately no matter when or where. Now, I scrolled to the very bottom without hesitation. Block this caller. Confirm. The world is quiet. I didn't call the family driver, but opened Uber instead and called a regular black sedan. The car arrived quickly. The driver was a Latino guy with a face full of stubble. He looked a bit surprised at my expensive gown covered in mud, but didn't ask anything. Just turned on the heater for me. "Where to, ma'am?" LaGuardia Airport. I gave the name of the place, then leaned back against the slightly rough leather seat in the back and closed my eyes. The car drove into the traffic of the rainy night, leaving that magnificent yet nauseating Metropolitan Museum and the identity known as Mrs. Davenport, all far behind. I felt lighter than ever before, as if I had just cut out a piece of rotting flesh that had been growing on my heart for years. At the airport, I bought a ticket for the earliest flight to Burlington. That's a small city in Vermont where my grandmother, Nana Rose, lives. There's no Vanity Fair there, no hypocritical dinner parties, only long winters and fireplaces that never go out. Before boarding, I went to the restroom. The woman in the mirror was exquisitely made up but pale. I took off the diamond earrings. They were a wedding anniversary gift from Spencer, but I knew his secretary had picked them out. Then I took off the necklace from my neck. Finally, my gaze fell on my left ring finger. That 10-carat pink diamond ring had once been the envy of the entire New York socialite circle. It was like a heavy shackle that had locked me up for 3 whole years. I yanked it off. My knuckles turned white from the effort, leaving a faint ring mark. I took a napkin from my bag, one I'd grabbed in the Uber earlier. I wrapped up the ring, along with that expensive jewelry, stuffed them into an envelope labeled "Lost and Found," and threw it into the nearest FedEx drop box. Shipping address: Spencer Davenport, 40 Wall Street. After finishing all this, I only felt my fingertips go cold, but a fire was burning in my heart. The broadcast started calling for boarding. I took one last look out the window at the rainy, misty New York nightscape. Those brilliant lights looked like countless greedy eyes. Goodbye, Spencer. This time, I'm not waiting. When the plane landed in Vermont, it was already 3 in the morning. The air here was filled with the scent of pine needles and damp earth, cold enough to pierce my lungs. I wrapped the cashmere coat I'd bought last minute at the airport duty-free tighter around me and took a taxi straight to my grandmother's cabin in the woods. My phone vibrated countless times along the way. Although I had blocked Spencer's number, the other social apps and that bunch of helpful socialite friends hadn't let up. I sat in the back of the taxi, watching coldly as messages kept popping up on the screen. On Instagram, Jade had posted an update. The picture showed a man's hand holding a glass of water. It was Spencer's hand, and the Patek Philippe on his wrist was still his favorite model. The background was an artistic yet messy apartment in the West Village. The caption was, "Some bonds can never be severed. Thank you, S." There were already dozens of comments underneath, some speculating, some mocking, and others adding my account, asking why I hadn't shown up yet. I swiped past expressionlessly, tapped on settings, and directly deleted the account named Evelyn_Davenport. That account was full of the life carefully curated as a perfect wife, flower arranging, charity galas, and the occasional glimpse of Spencer's back. That was fake. All of it was fake. Now, I've torn this mask to shreds with my own hands. The car stopped in front of Grandma's cabin, and the lights were actually still on. Grandma Rose is a cool old lady. At 70, she's still drinking whiskey and listening to jazz. She never sleeps, just takes a nap when she's sleepy. I pushed open that heavy oak door, and the heat and music from the old record player hit me right in the face. Grandmother was sitting in the rocking chair, holding a glass of amber liquid in her hand, a bohemian-style blanket draped over her knees. Seeing me push the door open, looking bedraggled, she didn't show much surprise. "Looks like it's raining hard in New York." She swirled her glass, those sharp gray-blue eyes looking at me through her reading glasses. "Are you here for a vacation, or are you here to seek refuge?" "I'm here to get a divorce." I set down the only small handbag I was holding, walked over to the fireplace, and let the flames drive away the chill from my body. Grandmother raised her eyebrows and took a sip of wine. "It's about time. That kid was never good enough for you from the start. Aside from having some stinking money, his brain is practically like the Wall Street bull's ass stuffed full of dollars." I couldn't help but smile. It was the first time I genuinely smiled in the last 24 hours. "I want to stay here for a while." "The room is always kept for you." Grandma pointed upstairs. "But if you're looking to hide away for some peace and quiet, I'm afraid it won't be that easy. The Davenport family hounds have a very keen sense of smell." I knew what she was talking about. Just then, my phone started vibrating crazily again. This time it was an unknown number, but I knew it was Spencer's personal assistant, David, the one who was always respectful to me but had cold eyes. I pressed decline. Immediately after, another unknown number called, then a third and a fourth. Spencer was getting frantic, not because he was worried about me, but because I was out of control. I imagined what he looked like right now, probably just having settled Jade in, returning to that empty home, finding there wasn't a light left on for him like usual, nor the wife who would help him take off his coat and hand him hot tea. What would he do? Be angry, in disbelief, or think I was playing some hard-to-get game? I turned off the phone and threw it into the corner of the sofa. "Grandma, I want to sleep for 3 days and 3 nights." "Go ahead." Grandma waved her hand. "There'll be cinnamon rolls when you wake up." Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in Manhattan, inside the penthouse apartment at 740 Park Avenue, Spencer Davenport was standing in the entryway, his brows furrowed tightly. The room was pitch black, with only the faint light casting in from the Manhattan night view outside the window. There was a faint, stale smell in the air, the scent of a place that hadn't been carefully tended to. Usually at this time, no matter how late it was, Evelyn would be sitting under that floor lamp in the living room, reading and waiting for him. As soon as she heard the sound of the lock turning, she would immediately get up and come over to meet him, wearing that gentle smile on her face that was almost humble. But today, it was like a tomb here. "Evelyn!" he called out, his voice echoing in the empty living room. No one answered. Spencer loosened his tie irritably. He thought she was still angry. After all, he really had left her there alone tonight. But he felt he had a valid reason. Jade was about to kill herself. As a wife, shouldn't Evelyn be a little more generous? He took out his phone and dialed that number. "The subscriber you dialed is busy." One more time. "The user you dialed is busy." Spencer's face darkened. Blocked? Such a childish high school girl trick, actually coming from Evelyn? He threw his phone onto the marble coffee table with a crisp clatter. He was certain that by tomorrow morning, Evelyn would come back crying to apologize, saying she was just acting on impulse, saying she couldn't leave him. He walked into the walk-in closet, preparing to change out of that suit, stained with Jade's tears and the smell of alcohol. However, when he opened the door to Evelyn's side of the closet, his whole body froze. The seasonal haute couture gowns that had been packed full were now half missing. Her favorite silk pajamas, the skincare products she used often, and even that old teddy bear she hugged every day, they were all gone. All that remained were those jewelry boxes bearing the Davenport family crest, stacked neatly on the shelves as if mocking his presumption. A panic like never before, like a venomous snake, crawled up his spine. This wasn't a tantrum. This was moving out. Spencer spun around abruptly, rushed back to the living room to grab his phone, and dialed his assistant, his voice trembling uncontrollably for the first time. "Find out where Evelyn is. Check flights, check trains, check all exit records. Right now, immediately." The rain outside the window was still falling, shrouding all of New York in a blurry chaos, while I was already sound asleep under a heavy down comforter in Vermont. During my first week in Vermont, it was like I had returned to my girlhood. No alarm clocks, no social schedules that needed meticulous maintenance, and no man whose face I had to constantly read. I wore loose flannel plaid shirts, went barefaced, helped Grandma trim the holly in the garden, or drove that beat-up pickup truck to town to buy fresh maple syrup. But I underestimated Spencer Davenport's abilities, and I also underestimated his arrogance. On the afternoon of the third day, I was in the town cafe holding a novel I'd been reading for a long time but never had time to finish, enjoying the rare peace. The cafe door was pushed open, and a gust of cold wind poured in, accompanied by the crisp sound of wind chimes. The originally noisy little shop suddenly fell silent. I looked up and saw that man standing in the doorway. Spencer was still wearing that signature dark gray cashmere coat of his, impeccably tailored and spotless, completely out of place in this rustic little town. His appearance was just like a wolf from the metropolis barging into a rabbit's territory. 2 bodyguards followed behind him, their imposing aura making the surrounding villagers all turn to stare. Our gazes met in midair. He looked a bit haggard with faint dark circles under his eyes and some stubble appearing on his chin. In his meticulous elite world, this was an almost unimaginable loss of composure. The moment he saw me, his tense shoulders seemed to relax a bit. But immediately after, that familiar, suffocating desire for control surged back into his eyes. He strode towards me, his leather shoes stepping on the old wooden floor, making a dull sound. "Evelyn." He stood in front of my desk, looking down at me, his voice husky. "Are you done making a scene?" I closed my book, leisurely took a sip of the latte in my hand, and didn't even stand up. "I don't recall inviting you, Mr. Davenport." "Don't call me that." He frowned, obviously feeling extremely uncomfortable with my coldness. "Come back with me. Next week is the Davenport Group's annual shareholders meeting. As the hostess, you must attend. See, this is Spencer. Even having chased me all the way here, what implies from his mouth is still shareholders meeting, hostess, and must. In his world, I am a functional symbol first and a person second. I won't go back." I looked at him calmly, with no ripples of emotion in my eyes. "The divorce papers should have already been sent to your office, or did your secretary not dare to show them to you? I don't accept the divorce." He abruptly pulled out the chair opposite me and sat down, leaning his body forward, a sense of oppression rushing straight at me. "Evelyn, I know I shouldn't have left you behind that night. I've already bought you that pink diamond necklace you've always wanted as compensation. Jade's mental state is very bad right now. The doctor says she has severe depressive tendencies, and I can't just ignore her. But that doesn't mean I don't value you." "Value?" I chuckled softly as if I'd heard a joke. "Spencer, do you know how I left that night? I called an Uber. During those 10 minutes waiting for the car, 3 drunk homeless men tried to hit on me, and my husband was busy handing tissues to another woman." Spencer's expression froze for a moment. It seemed he didn't expect this to happen. "I'm so sorry, but I thought you would call the driver." "You always thought," I interrupted him. "You thought I'd wait for you right here forever. Thought you could just buy me off with some expensive jewelry. Thought I had no dignity, no bottom line." I took a deep breath, pulled the medical report I got from the hospital this morning out of my bag, placed it face down on the table, and slid it over to him. "Look at this, Spencer." He glanced at me in confusion, then reached out and flipped the paper over. When his gaze landed on the words, his whole body froze as if struck by lightning, and his pupils constricted sharply. "Informed consent form for pregnancy termination surgery. Although it was just a consultation form and not actual proof of surgery, I needed this knife to twist deep enough. You His hand began to tremble, making that thin sheet of paper feel heavy as lead in his grip. "You're pregnant? Since when?" 6 weeks, I said coldly. "That night I wanted to tell you over dinner, to celebrate our 3rd anniversary and for this surprise, but you didn't give me the chance. You didn't even come home for dinner." Spencer's face instantly turned deathly pale. He stared fixedly at the paper, as if trying to burn a hole through every single word. "What about the baby? What did you do?" "I don't need a child from a man who has another woman in his heart." I lied, but I had to do it to completely sever his illusions. I don't want my child born into a family of cold violence, becoming a bargaining chip in the games between us. So it's gone. "Evelyn Vane." He slammed the table and stood up abruptly, the coffee cup on the table jumping from the shock, brown liquid splashing out. Everyone in the entire cafe looked over here in horror. His eyes were terrifyingly red, as if he wanted to eat someone alive, his chest heaving violently. "How dare you? That was my child. You have no right to make that decision on your own." "I do." I stood up, staring fearlessly straight into his eyes that were furious to the extreme. "This is my body. From the moment you abandoned me for Jade, you lost the right to be a father." I picked up the half cup of Americano that had long since gone cold. Not a latte, but bitter black coffee. Under everyone's gaze, I raised my hand and splashed that cup of coffee onto his $5,000 cashmere coat. The brown stain quickly spread across the gray fabric like an ugly scar. Spencer froze. He seemed unable to believe that Evelyn, who was as docile as a sheep, would actually do something like this to him. "Sobered up a bit, Mr. Davenport." I put down the empty cup, picked up my bag, and turned to leave. "Get out of my sight. Also, that white moonlight never existed. That was just a self-indulgent fantasy born of your teenage regrets. The person I am now is the one you should regret losing." I strode out of the cafe. The moment I pushed open the door, the cold wind dried that imperceptible trace of moisture at the corner of my eye. The sound of a chair being knocked over came from behind me, but I didn't look back. This is a war, and I've already won the first round. But I know with Spencer's personality, this is just the beginning. People like him only feel pain when they truly lose all control. And I will make sure the pain is etched into his bones. That confrontation at the coffee shop was like a depth charge, completely shattering Spencer's long-held sense of control. He didn't immediately chase after them, perhaps stunned by the spilled coffee, or perhaps his defenses crumbled under the false yet devastating news that the child is gone. But I know the men of the Davenport family don't have the words "let go" in their dictionary. Back at grandmother's cabin, I shut myself in the attic studio. These past few days, I picked up the paintbrush again. Before marriage, I was a top student at Parsons, too. But after the wedding, Spencer said, "Mrs. Davenport doesn't need hands covered in paint." So I put down the brush and picked up wine glasses and invitations. Now the canvas is once again covered with my favorite colors, the red maples of late autumn in Vermont, the snow-capped Stowe in the distance, and that blue sky so free it makes you want to cry. 3 days later, my phone rang. This time it wasn't an unknown number, but Spencer's mother, that old Mrs. Davenport known for her iron fist. Evelyn. Her voice on the other end was still elegant, yet cold, carrying an unquestionable aristocratic tone. "I heard you're making a fuss about a divorce, and you even fabricated a lie about a miscarriage to spite Spencer? This is very improper." I couldn't help but sneer. Look, this is the information network of a wealthy family. Even if I was thousands of miles away, no matter how much of a breakdown Spencer was having at the time, they could still quickly piece together the so-called truth and pin the blame on the person who looked the most vulnerable. "Whether it's a lie or not, you can ask your son where he was that night," I answered nonchalantly while washing my paintbrush. "As for the divorce, that's set in stone. I've already signed the agreement. As soon as Spencer signs, we're square." "Square?" The old madam's voice deepened slightly. Do you think the Davenport family's door is somewhere you can just walk in and out of as you please? Your father's company is currently applying for a bridge loan. If news of a divorce leaks at a time like this, the bank... This is a naked threat. If it were before, I would have panicked, compromised, and bowed my head again for that crumbling family of origin. But now, I just find it ridiculous. Then let it go bankrupt, I interrupted her. That shell company that relies on selling its daughter to keep up appearances should have folded long ago. You can tell Father that if he dares to come harass me, I'll send the evidence of him embezzling funds to the FBI. The other end of the phone fell into a long, dead silence. The old lady had probably never seen an Evelyn Vane this crazy in her life. You're crazy. She finally just squeezed out these 3 words, then hung up the phone. I tossed the phone aside and looked out the window. A snowstorm was brewing. Meanwhile, Manhattan. Spencer returned to that cold, empty penthouse. He didn't turn on the lights, wandering through every room like a ghost. The coat that had coffee spilled on it had already been taken away by the butler to be dealt with, but he seemed to still be able to smell that bitter scent. "Sir, the greenhouse called to ask, do you want to renew the order for white roses this season?" The butler walked over cautiously, holding a bill in his hand. Spencer paused for a moment. "White roses?" "Yes, ma'am. I mean Miss Evelyn, when she was alive." "Oh no, she used to like this variety best. It's called Avalanche. But this flower is very delicate. No one has taken care of it these past few days, and it looks like it's about to die." Spencer abruptly pushed open the glass door leading to the terrace greenhouse. The once lush greenhouse was now desolate. Those roses that usually bloomed as white as clouds had all drooped their heads, the edges of their petals tinged with a withered, scorched yellow, looking like a swarm of dead butterflies. He walked over and reached out to touch one of them, but pricked his finger on a thorn. Bright red beads of blood oozed out, looking shocking on the pale petals. He suddenly remembered that over the past 3 years, Evelyn's hands always had tiny cuts on them too. He used to think she just got them from being careless while cooking, and even casually told her not to do such menial work. It turned out that she was working with her own hands to bring even the slightest bit of life to this home. And what about him? He just treated all this as a taken-for-granted backdrop and was even too stingy to offer a single word of praise. Renew it. He stared dead at that withered flower, his voice hoarse beyond belief. "Find the best gardener. I don't care how much it costs. You must save them." "But, sir..." The butler hesitated. "The gardener said these flowers can't be saved because the roots were damaged by the cold, unless we change the soil and replant them." Replant them. Just like his and Evelyn's marriage, the roots were already rotten. No matter how much the branches and leaves were pruned, it was just futile. Spencer felt a sense of suffocation he had never experienced before. He took out his phone, wanting to call that number again, but found his fingers were trembling. Just then, a news notification popped up. Breaking. Famous painter Jade slashed wrists in West Village apartment, currently rushed to Mount Sinai Hospital for emergency treatment. Spencer looked at the screen, but his eyes were surprisingly cold. If it were before, he would have rushed out long ago. But now, what floated in his mind was the look in Evelyn's eyes that rainy night, standing alone by the roadside, watching his car speed away. What kind of look was that? Despair? Dead silence? Or relief? He suddenly realized that Jade's so-called suicide was just another performance to get attention, and Evelyn's silent departure was the real clean break. He threw his phone onto the sofa, didn't go to the hospital, and instead turned around and walked into the study. On the desk in the study lay that divorce agreement he had crumpled up and smoothed out again. That was Evelyn's handwriting, elegant and firm, without a hint of hesitation. In the column for division of property, she had filled in none, leaving with nothing. She wanted nothing. She even returned that priceless pink diamond ring. She just wanted to leave him. This realization made Spencer feel a sense of frustration that cut to the bone. He was a wolf of Wall Street, used to trading interests for everything, yet for the first time, he had encountered an opponent who couldn't be bought with money. "You want a clean break?" He looked at the agreement, the corner of his mouth curling into a smile bordering on madness. "Evelyn, in this lifetime, don't you even dream of making a clean break with me." He grabbed a pen, slashed a vicious line across the agreement, and then picked up the internal line. "Get my private jet ready." His voice was as cold as ice. "We're going to Vermont. Also notify legal that if the Vane family business wants that loan, Evelyn has to come talk to me herself." Since playing nice didn't work, he'd do it the hard way. He was going to break her wings and lock her back in this gilded cage. Even if she was just a soulless shell, he would absolutely not let go. The snow in Vermont finally began to fall. The snow here wasn't like in New York where it turned to slush the moment it hit the ground. Instead, it was pure white and heavy, like a massive goose-down duvet, gently covering everything. I was sitting on the rug in front of the fireplace, reading this issue of The New Yorker to Grandma. She listened intently, occasionally throwing in a few sharp comments. Suddenly, a rush of urgent knocking broke the silence. It wasn't a polite tap, but had a forceful, almost break-down-the-door kind of intensity. My heart tightened, and I put down the magazine. Grandma patted the back of my hand, signaling me not to move, and stood up, leaning on her cane. "I'll go see which lost wild bear it is." The door opened. Standing outside wasn't a wild bear, but Spencer. But this time, he wasn't wearing that elite-style coat. Instead, he was in a heavy mountaineering suit, his hair covered in snow, and on his shoulder, he was carrying a freshly cut Christmas tree. My grandmother and I were both stunned. "What act is this now?" Grandmother raised an eyebrow with no intention of letting him in. "Mr. Davenport, it's only November. Christmas is still over a month away." Spencer ignored grandmother's mockery. His gaze looked past grandmother's shoulder and landed straight on me. That look held none of the previous rage and arrogance, instead carrying an almost obsessive heat. "Evelyn, I know you like real fir trees." He panted heavily. Clearly, this tree was not light. "I spent a long time picking it out on the back hill. This is the best one." I stood up, walked to the door, and looked at him coldly. "What exactly are you trying to do?" "I'm pursuing you." He placed the tree on the porch and brushed the pine needles off his hands, his tone terrifyingly serious. "Since you said the previous marriage was a mistake, then let's start over. I won't treat you as Mrs. Davenport, only as Evelyn Vane. Give me a chance to pursue you again." I looked at his ears, red from the cold, and those eyes full of anticipation, but inside I only found it absurd. "Do you think this is a Hollywood romantic comedy?" I crossed my arms. "Spencer, you just can't accept it. You can't accept that your possession has a will of its own, can't accept being dumped by me. This isn't love, it's possessiveness." "No matter what it is, I won't leave." He took an envelope out of his pocket and handed it to me. "This is the loan contract for your father's company. As long as you're willing to have a meal with me, I'll sign. That trick again. Coercion and bribery, using both the carrot and the stick. I didn't take that envelope. Instead, I looked him in the eye and said, one word at a time. Then you're probably going to be disappointed. Just 10 minutes ago, I sold off all the shares I held. The life or death of the Vane family has nothing to do with me, not even half a cent." Spencer's expression froze. He obviously didn't expect me to go this far, giving up even the last way out. "You..." He opened his mouth, seeming like he wanted to say something, but swallowed it back. Just then, a red Jeep Wrangler charged over from the snow, pulled a beautiful drift, and stopped in front of the cabin. The car door opened, and out stepped a tall man wearing a flannel jacket and work boots. He had messy blonde hair and a brilliant smile, carrying 2 bags of groceries in his hands. It was Lucas, the only vet in town, and a friend I just met these past few days. He cured the arthritis in one of Grandma's old cats. He's a sunny guy who makes you feel warm. "Hey, Evelyn, Nana Rose," Lucas greeted loudly, completely ignoring Spencer beside him, who was radiating a gloomy aura. "I brought fresh venison and craft beer. We can make stew tonight." Spencer's gaze instantly became like knives, staring dead at Lucas. "Who is he?" I ignored Spencer, instead smiling as I went to greet Lucas, even reaching out to take a bag from him. "Awesome, Lucas. I was just craving this. Come in quick, it's cold out." Just like that, right in front of Spencer, I walked into the house talking and laughing with another man. The moment I closed the door, I saw a flash of hurt and disbelief in Spencer's eyes. That look was just like a large dog that had been abandoned by its owner. But I didn't soften. The door slammed shut with a bang, locking that arrogant Wall Street tycoon out in the blizzard. Did I come at a bad time? Lucas changed his shoes while pointing awkwardly outside the door. "That dude looks like he wants to kill me." Ignore him. I took the ingredients and walked toward the kitchen, just an irrelevant ex-husband. Dinner was very pleasant. Lucas was a great listener and very humorous. He and Grandma chatted up a storm while I sat to the side watching the dancing flames in the fireplace, feeling for the first time that the word home had warmth. But I also knew that Spencer was still out there. Through the gap in the curtains, I could see that Rolls-Royce still parked by the side of the road, a thin layer of snow already coating its body. He hadn't left, nor had he knocked again, just standing guard there like a statue. That night, I slept very restlessly. In the middle of the night, I heard strange noises coming from downstairs. It sounded like someone was picking the lock, or like a heavy object crashing against something. I startled awake, threw on my robe, and rushed downstairs. The living room door was wide open, and the cold wind poured in, making the embers in the fireplace flicker dim and bright. Spencer was collapsed on the rug by the door, covered in snow, his face burning red, mumbling something incoherently. "Evelyn, don't go with anyone else." He had a fever, a high fever. Grandma had been woken up too. She walked out, leaning on her cane, looked at the man on the ground and sighed. "Is this the result you wanted? If he freezes to death on my doorstep, I'll have to go down to the station too." Looking at the man who was once so high-spirited now curled up wretchedly on the floor, I didn't feel the thrill of revenge, only a deep sense of exhaustion. "Is Lucas still in town?" I asked Grandma. "Get him to come take a look." "It's so late. That kid is probably dead to the world." Grandma shook her head. "Let's just drag this bastard inside first. Don't want him actually dying here." My grandmother and I used every ounce of our strength to finally drag Spencer onto the sofa. His body was burning up like a furnace, so I fed him some fever medicine and applied a cold towel to his forehead. The whole time, he kept a tight grip on my wrist, squeezing so hard it felt like he was going to crush my bones. "I'm sorry," he mumbled in his delirium, a tear sliding down from the corner of his eye. "I know I was wrong. Really wrong." I watched that tear seep into the sofa, my heart filled with mixed feelings. Deep affection that comes too late is cheaper than grass. But I didn't shake off his hand, not because I forgave him, but because I knew this might be the last of our entanglements. When the sun rises tomorrow and his fever breaks, I'll make him understand once and for all that some things, once broken, are just broken. Even if you glue them back together with diamond dust, they're still full of cracks, and that trap has already been laid. Spencer was out sick for 3 days. His fever came and went, as if burning out all the energy he'd overdrawn and the emotions he'd suppressed over the years all at once. Lying on that not-so-spacious bed in Grandmother's guest room, stripped of his Wall Street elite armor, he looked as fragile as a child. But that didn't mean I'd go soft. I looked after him merely out of basic humanitarianism, and because I didn't want grandmother's house to become a haunted house. On the evening of the third day, he finally came to. When I walked into the room carrying a bowl of plain oatmeal, I saw him leaning against the headboard staring blankly at a photo frame he was clutching in his hand. That photo frame was one I had placed on the nightstand. Inside was a photo of me from college. It was at the graduation exhibition. I was standing in front of my own work, smiling a bit shyly, but my eyes were shockingly bright. And in a corner of the photo, a passing figure seen from behind was captured blurrily. That was Spencer. This is my only secret and also the irrefutable proof that I once loved him. Seeing me enter, Spencer jerked his head up, his eyes holding a look of shock and ecstasy, as if he had discovered a new continent. "This is me, right?" He pointed at the back view in the photo, his voice hoarse but urgent. "This is the Parsons graduation exhibition from that year? You were there too?" I set down the oatmeal, took the photo frame back with a bland expression, and placed it face down on the table. "That was a long time ago. It's meaningless." "It matters!" He grabbed my wrist, his grip strong enough to cause me a bit of pain. "We crossed paths back then? Why did you never mention it?" "What difference would it make?" I looked at him calmly. "Tell you that I had a foolish secret crush on you back then. Tell you that to be good enough for you, I tried desperately to make myself proper. Spencer, back then you only had eyes for that talented Jade. A good girl like me who just followed behind you was nothing but a boring background board to you." Spencer's pupils trembled violently. He seemed to be trying hard to recall that memory, but clearly there was no place for me in his memory. I didn't know." He was somewhat incoherent. "If that's the case, our marriage wasn't entirely a business exchange? You married me out of love?" "It was out of love." I withdrew my hand, my tone as cold as the icicles outside the window. "But I've exhausted that love. 3 years, over 1,000 days and nights. Every time I was ignored by you, every time I watched you be at another woman's beck and call, a layer of that love was worn away until that rainy night when it was completely gone." Spencer's face instantly went deathly pale, that kind of regret almost overflowing from his eyes. "Evelyn, I really didn't know. I always thought you married me for family interests too. I thought we were just partners getting by. If I had known you loved me..." "If you had known, what would you have done?" I cut him off, a sarcastic smile curling at the corner of my mouth. "Would you have been moved? Or would you have treated it like a trophy you could toy with at will, squandering my feelings even more recklessly?" He opened his mouth, but couldn't get the words out, because he knew I was right. With that arrogant personality of his, love that is easily obtained is never cherished. "Eat the porridge and leave tomorrow." I turned to leave. "I'm not leaving," he shouted from behind, his voice pleading. "Evelyn, give me a chance to make it up. I swear there will never be Jade again or anyone else. I'll learn how to love you, just like you loved me back then. It's too late." I didn't look back, just said softly, "I don't need it anymore." Just then, the sound of a car engine came from downstairs. I walked to the window and saw that red Wrangler parked at the door again. Lucas jumped out of the car, holding a large bouquet of sunflowers wrapped in craft paper, looking exceptionally bright in the snow. He shouted from downstairs, "Evelyn, look what I brought! These were just cut from the greenhouse." I turned around, looked at the deathly pale Spencer, and smiled cruelly. "Look, someone is already willing to find sunflowers for me in the winter, but you only know how to send those cookie-cutter white roses ordered by your secretary." After saying that, I walked out of the room, gently closed that door, and shut his hope inside as well. But I didn't expect that Spencer's madness went far beyond my imagination. Early the next morning, when I was getting ready to go to town with Lucas, I found that Rolls-Royce parked across the front of our car, blocking the way. Spencer stood by the car, Although his face was still pale, that ruthlessness of a superior had returned to him. "Move." I frowned at him. "I won't." He stared at Lucas in the driver's seat, his gaze sinister. "Unless you come back with me. Otherwise, I don't mind making this Mr. Vet's little clinic disappear from this town. You know I have the power." Lucas paused for a moment, then immediately pushed open the car door and stepped out, rolling up his sleeves to reveal his solid arm muscles. "Hey, buddy, this is America, not your Wall Street office. You want to fight?" "Lucas, don't be rash." I stopped Lucas, then walked toward Spencer. "You're pushing me." I lowered my voice, every word sounding like it was squeezed through my teeth. "Spencer, if you keep pestering me like this, it will only make me even more disgusted with you." "Disgust is better than being ignored." He looked at me almost obsessively. "Hate is an emotion too, Evelyn. As long as you're still looking at me, even if you hate me, I'll take it." I took a deep breath, suddenly feeling a wave of nausea like never before. It wasn't because of his words, but something physical. I covered my mouth as that familiar urge to vomit hit me again. I pushed him away, rushed to a snowbank by the roadside, and retched until I almost threw up bile. Spencer froze. Then, as if realizing something, he suddenly rushed over to support me. "You..." His hands were trembling, a trace of disbelieving ecstasy flashing in his eyes. "You're still throwing up? The baby is still there." I was startled. Damn it, that lie is about to be exposed. Just then, Lucas rushed over too and shoved Spencer away. "Don't touch her. Are you blind? She's having a stress reaction. Every time she sees scum like you, she feels sick." This is a perfect excuse. I leaned into Lucas's arms, panting weakly, and stared coldly at Spencer. "Did you hear that? You're the one who makes me sick." The light in Spencer's eyes instantly went out, replaced by a deep self-loathing. He took 2 steps back, as if crushed by those words. "Okay," he murmured. "Okay, I won't touch you, but I won't give up. I'll stay right here until you're not disgusted anymore." He turned around and got into the car, moved it aside, and cleared a path. Lucas helped me into the car, and as it drove away, I saw in the rearview mirror that Spencer was still standing in the snow, like a lonely tombstone. But I knew this wasn't enough. I had to make him give up completely, make him utterly despair, before I could truly be free. And the turning point that would make him despair was coming soon. Spencer's waiting didn't last too long, because the whip of reality always strikes the hardest. A week later, a massive PR crisis exploded at the Davenport Group. Someone leaked to the media financial loopholes within the Davenport Family Trust, as well as the funds Spencer misappropriated to cover the deficit caused by Jade's lavish spending. Although the amount wasn't enough to cripple the massive Davenport Group, this was about reputation, and even more so, it was the opportunity those board members, eyeing Spencer, had been waiting for. The person who leaked it was, naturally, me. Before leaving New York, I backed up the files on the study computer that Spencer had carelessly tossed on the desktop. He was too arrogant, never guarding against anything, or rather, he never thought that the wife, who only knew how to arrange flowers and brew tea, could understand those complex reports. When the news reached Vermont, Spencer's phone was practically blowing up. He had to go. Before leaving, he came to Grandma's cabin again. This time he didn't force his way in, but just looked at me deeply through the window. In that look, there was anger, confusion, and mostly a sense of brokenness from being backstabbed by the person closest to him. "Was it you, Evelyn?" he asked through the glass, his voice very soft. I sat in the rocking chair, knitting a scarf, a Christmas gift for Lucas. I didn't look up, only nodded slightly. "Why?" "To make you understand that I'm not just your accessory." I raised my head, my eyes calm. "I can make you, and I can ruin you. Now go back and clean up your mess. This is the parting gift I'm giving you." Spencer gave a bitter smile, turned around, and walked into the wind and snow. In that moment, I thought this was the end. But I was wrong. If Spencer Davenport were someone so easily defeated, he wouldn't be the wolf of Wall Street. In just 2 weeks, he not only quelled the storm, but also used the opportunity to purge the opposition from the board and regain power. That ruthless, decisive Spencer was back. Then an exquisite invitation was sent to Vermont. It was an invitation to the Davenport Group's 50th anniversary gala, and also his ultimatum to me. Tucked inside the invitation was a note with only one sentence. "Evelyn, if you don't come, I will have Lucas's veterinary license revoked tomorrow and Nana Rose's pension account frozen. You know I can do it." Despicable, shameless. But I had no choice. On the day of the celebration, I appeared at the Waldorf Astoria in New York wearing a black deep V evening gown. That wasn't the dignified style Mrs. Davenport should have, but more like a black swan returned from hell, bearing a kind of resolute beauty. When I walked into the banquet hall on Spencer's arm, the whole room instantly fell silent. Everyone thought I was already past tense, thought that the one standing beside Spencer tonight would be Jade, who had caused such a stir all over town. But Jade didn't appear. Spencer gripped my fingers tightly, hard enough to hurt. He leaned close to my ear and said in a voice that was almost through gritted teeth, "You see, as long as I want it, you still have to come back to me. Evelyn, stop acting up, let's go home." I turned my head and gave him a beaming smile. That smile was so radiant it left him stunned. "Okay, let's go home." The banquet was halfway through and it was time for the traditional toasts. Spencer stood on stage, the spotlight hitting him, making him look like a glowing god. He raised his glass, preparing to deliver that speech about family glory and future visions. And I stood in the first row off the stage, holding a glass of red wine in my hand. Just as everyone was holding their breath, I suddenly felt a violent pain in my abdomen. That pain felt like a knife churning in my stomach, and warm liquid flowed down my thighs. The glass in my hand hit the floor with a crisp crash, interrupting Spencer's speech. "Evelyn!" He saw it, saw my pale face, saw that shocking pool of blood beneath me rapidly spreading across the white carpet. It wasn't red wine, it was blood. The baby. That life, which I had covered up with lies but which truly existed, announced its departure in the most tragic way, right in the center of this Vanity Fair full of hypocrisy and calculation. Spencer jumped off the stage like a madman and rushed to my side. He knelt on the ground, those expensive handmade dress pants stained with blood. He trembled, wanting to pick me up but afraid to move. How could there be blood? His voice was shattered beyond recognition, his eyes filled with immense panic. "You said the baby was gone. You lied to me? The baby is still here?" I lay in his arms, my consciousness starting to blur, but the hatred in my heart was clearer than ever before. He is still here. I used my last ounce of strength to clutch his collar, looking into his eyes, saying word for word, "But I don't want him to be born anymore, Spencer. You drove him to his death. You forced me to come back." No, call an ambulance, quick, call an ambulance," he roared like a wounded beast, huge tears smashing onto my face. All around was a chaos of exclamations, flashbulbs flashing madly, recording this wealthy family's ugliest, most tragic scene. I closed my eyes amidst that chaos. This is true revenge, not blocking him, not splashing coffee, not leaking secrets, but making him watch with his own eyes as his most cherished bloodline died at his most glorious celebration because of his tyranny and coercion. At that moment, I knew that between me and Spencer Davenport, we were done for in this lifetime. It was a real, absolute dead end. When I woke up again, it was in one of those suffocating white hospital wards. The air was thick with the smell of disinfectant, and outside the window was a gray sky, looking like it was about to crush this city. I moved my fingers slightly, feeling my body was as light as a feather, yet as empty as a dry well. That little life that had been with me for over 3 months was gone completely. The hospital room door was pushed open. It wasn't a nurse who came in, nor was it Spencer, but David, his assistant. David's expression was complicated. Holding a document in his hand, he walked to the bedside and handed it to me, respectful yet distant. "Madam." "Miss Evelyn, sir asked me to pass this on to you." I didn't take it, just glancing at it indifferently. Written clearly on the cover was divorce agreement. He had already signed it. The handwriting was scrawled, revealing an indescribable sense of dejection and powerlessness. In the property division section, he had crossed out the none I originally filled in and replaced it with a staggering string of numbers, as well as 5% of the shares in the Davenport Group. "Sir said this is his compensation to you and also atonement for that child," David whispered. "He said that from today on, you are free. He won't appear before you again." I looked at the agreement, surprisingly feeling not a single ripple of emotion in my heart. Atonement? That unformed child exchanged a life for my freedom and hundreds of millions of dollars in wealth. In the eyes of that Wall Street crowd, this deal was probably worth it. "Where is he?" I asked. "Sir is in the lounge next door. He watched over you for 2 days and 2 nights and was just forcibly taken to rest by people sent by the old madam. His condition is very bad. Tell him I accepted the money." I picked up the pen and signed my name on the agreement. My hand was steady without a single tremble. "As for the shares, donate them to the Children's Welfare Foundation. I don't want blood-stained money." David froze for a moment, seemingly surprised that I would do this, but he said nothing. He gathered the documents, bowed deeply, and backed out of the room. I got out of the hospital the very next day. I didn't tell anyone, nor did I go back to the place that used to be home. I just had Grandma call Lucas over, and he drove me out of New York in that red Wrangler. As the car drove over the George Washington Bridge, I looked back at that steel forest one last time. Sunlight pierced through the clouds and shone on the Hudson River, sparkling on the waves. Goodbye, Manhattan. Goodbye, Spencer. Life back in Vermont was so peaceful it felt like a dream. My physical wounds healed quickly, but the hole in my heart needed time to fill. I filled Grandma's yard with wild roses, not those delicate white roses, but the tough, resilient kind. Lucas became a regular part of my life. He wasn't domineering like Spencer, and he didn't have all that so-called elite baggage. He'd roll around in the snow with me, get covered in mud just to bandage an injured fawn, and clumsily learn to cook Chinese food to help me recover. He was like a ray of sunshine, slowly dispelling the gloom in my heart. One afternoon, 6 months later, I was pruning branches in the garden. Lucas walked over, scratched his head a bit nervously, and pulled an inexpensive but exquisitely designed silver ring from his pocket. "Evelyn, I know it might be a bit early right now, and you might not be ready yet." His face turned bright red. "But I still want to ask, would you be willing to let me take care of those flowers, and while I'm at it, take care of you too?" I looked into his sincere eyes, then looked at the roses blooming all over the yard. I thought of that rainy night and that resolute version of myself. I used to think love was like a moth to a flame, burning itself out. But now I understand that love can also be a slow, steady stream, warming each other. I took off my gloves and held out my hand. "All right, Lucas, but you have to promise me. Never give me white roses." He smiled goofily and slid the ring onto my finger. The size was just right. "As you command, Your Majesty." Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in New York, Spencer stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office, looking down at the bustling Wall Street. He had won back everything: power, status, money. Jade had been sent to a sanitarium and could no longer stir up trouble. The Davenport family remained that unshakable behemoth. But he felt cold. That coldness came from his very bones, and no matter how high the heating was turned up, it was of no use. On the table lay the latest private investigator's report. That was the only time he'd made an exception to investigate Evelyn's current situation. In the photo, she was wearing that loose plaid shirt, her face stained with mud, her smile as bright as a child's. And beside her, that blonde man was dotingly wiping the dirt off her face. That was an Evelyn he had never seen before, and also the Evelyn he had lost with his own hands. He picked up the lighter and lit that report. The flames swallowed the smile in the photo, finally turning into ashes that fell into his palm. In this moment, he finally understood. Some punishments aren't about being ruined or losing everything. Instead, it's having everything, yet losing the only person who truly loved you. And you have to carry this regret as you live out the rest of your long life alone. This is his ending. 2 years later. Lucas and I lived a simple and fulfilling life. We opened a small shop in a town in Vermont that combined a gallery and a flower shop, and our days were full of color. I originally thought I would never set foot in New York again in this life, but Parsons School of Design sent an invitation, inviting me back as a distinguished alumnus to attend a charity art exhibition. Lucas encouraged me to go. He said, "That's your talent, Evelyn. You should be shining bright there, not just rotting away in this small town." So, holding Lucas's arm, I stood once again on the soil of Manhattan. But I didn't expect that fate always plays such clumsy jokes. At the art exhibition's dinner party, I inevitably ran into Spencer. It was at a high-end cocktail party in the Chelsea Gallery district. Just as I was holding my champagne and chatting happily with an old professor, the doors to the hall were pushed open. A stir ran through the crowd. Spencer Davenport walked in. I hadn't seen him in 2 years. He seemed a bit thinner, and that sharp, aggressive aura of his had receded quite a bit, becoming deeper and more reserved, like an ancient sword hidden in its sheath. His gaze swept across the crowd, then landed precisely on me. In that instant, the air seemed to freeze. But he didn't storm over like he used to, nor did he show any loss of composure. He just raised his glass from a distance, as if greeting a long-lost friend, then turned around and continued exchanging pleasantries with others. That deliberate detachment actually took me by surprise. "That's your ex-husband?" Lucas whispered in my ear, a hint of wariness in his tone. "He doesn't look as scary as the rumors say." I smiled. "Don't be fooled by appearances. He's a wolf in human skin." After the dinner ended, it started to rain outside again. The rain in New York always seems to carry a sense of fate. Lucas went to the parking lot to get the car, and I stood alone under the gallery's eaves waiting for him. The wind was a bit strong, so I instinctively pulled my shawl tighter. A black umbrella suddenly shielded my head. I turned my head and saw Spencer. He stood 2 steps away from me, maintaining an extremely restrained and polite distance. Most of the umbrella in his hand was tilted towards me, while his own shoulder was already soaked by the rain. This scene eerily overlapped with that night 2 years ago. Only this time, the person under the umbrella was me, and the one getting rained on had become him. "Long time no see, Evelyn." His voice was a bit hoarse, sounding much older than before. "Long time no see, Mr. Davenport." I responded politely, my tone distant like a stranger. "How have you been?" He looked at me, his eyes hiding too many emotions I couldn't read: regret, longing, and deep suppression. "Very well." I raised my left hand, showing the inexpensive yet warm silver ring on my ring finger. "As you can see." Spencer's gaze lingered on that ring for a few seconds, his pupils constricting slightly, a sign of pain, but he quickly masked it, pulling a bitter smile at the corner of his mouth. "That's good. Does he treat you well?" "Very good." I looked at the curtain of rain and said calmly, "He remembers I don't eat cilantro, remembers I get stomach aches during my period, and remembers the inspiration for all my paintings. Most importantly, he would never let me wait in the rain alone." These words were like a sharp knife, stabbing precisely into Spencer's heart. His face turned deathly pale in an instant. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the umbrella handle, and his whole body was trembling slightly. Evelyn. He seemed to want to say something, but choked up. Just then, a red Wrangler pulled over to the curb. Lucas honked the horn, rolled down the window, and waved at me. "Hey, honey, get in quick! The rain is too heavy!" I turned around and nodded at Spencer. "My ride is here. Goodbye, Mr. Davenport." Without waiting for his response, I walked into the rain. In almost the same instant, Spencer stepped forward and shoved the umbrella into my hand. "Take it." His voice was low and urgent. "Don't get wet." I froze for a moment, looking at the umbrella in my hand with its lingering warmth, then looked at the man who was already completely exposed to the rain. "I don't need it." I placed the umbrella on the steps on the ground. "I have an umbrella." I pointed at Lucas. He was running over to pick me up, holding a big rainbow umbrella. It was one we sold in our little shop in Vermont, looking silly and warm. Lucas wrapped his arm around my shoulder, shielding me in his embrace. He glanced warily at Spencer, then escorted me into the car. The car started and drove off into the rainy night. I took one last look in the rearview mirror. Spencer was still standing there. He hadn't picked up the umbrella. The rain ran down his expensive haircut, soaking his face, making him look like a lonely ghost abandoned by the whole world. He once had the best of everything, but he shattered that light with his own hands. Now he can only stand in the darkness, watching someone else's light for the rest of his life. "What's wrong? What are you thinking about?" Lucas held my hand, his warm palm dispelling the chill at my fingertips. I looked away, leaned on his shoulder, and smiled softly. "Nothing. I just feel like the rain in New York isn't that cold anymore."